everyone, my name is Ariela Beatty Hernandez, and today we'll be talking about infancy development, how infants grow, the type of influential factors, their brain development, cognitive development, and their physical and social development, as well as toddlers and infants with special needs, and abuse and neglect. I hope you enjoy. So on this page, we'll be talking about the content, the factor influences of infancy, the different types of attachment, separation from caregivers, brain development, physical development, cognitive development, social development, infants and toddlers with special needs, and then we'll end it off with the conclusion and the works cited. So now let's talk about some of the factor influences of infancy. Infants become attached to their caregivers around 8 to 9 months of age, which is the most influential social relationship of an infant to establish. Culture plays a major role during infancy. For example, in some cultures, toddlers are separated from their mothers. They are carried around breastfed on demand until 3 years old, and they sleep in the same bed as the parent. While in the U.S., infants sleep in cribs or fed on a schedule that conforms to the parent's schedule. They have less physical contact with the parent and more time in infant seats, care seats, and daycare centers. Different types of attachments. For one, an insecure attachment, which is when a caregiver is being inconsistent or unresponsive to the infant. Another one would be resistant attachment, where infant becomes angry and avoids the mother and the caregiver. Avoidance attachment would be the infant is oblivious towards the mother or the caregiver. Disoriented, which is characterized by contradictory behavior and confusion towards the mother or primary caregiver. While infants that are securely attached have a strong emotional bond with the caregiver due to response caregiving. And securely attached infants are more curious, socially independent, and socially competent. Separation from caregiver. Infants can distinguish their own mothers from the caregivers. Infants exhibit little preference for caregivers over another or even a stranger. By the age of 7 months, this changes dramatically. Babies who have been smiling, welcoming, friendly, and accepting towards strangers suddenly become shy and wary of them. As the cognitive development of an infant's brain develops, they can distinguish caregivers from strangers and become aware when the caregiver is absent. So according to discrepancy hypothesis, separation anxiety occurs when infants become capable of detecting departure from the known or the expected. Infants can also experience stranger anxiety, or as they call it, separation anxiety, which is when an infant is being separated from the caregiver or being left alone in a strange place, which occurs during the first or second year. So now let's talk about brain development. Childhood development is influenced by the brain responding to stimuli. Normal brain developments depend on genetic factors as well as outside influences, such as parents responding to infants' needs. Caregivers of infants can help with brain development by providing an environment that supports the infant's sensory skills, such as hearing, sight, taste, smell, and touch. The growth spurt continues slowly throughout the childhood plasticity in which the brain can be modified through experience. Relationships between the infant and the caregiver, which influences social and emotional functioning. So now let's talk about some of the physical developments. By the age of 2 or 6, a child's body loses the infancy look and changes in size, proportion, and shape. At the same time, rapid brain development leads to sophisticated and complex learning abilities and gross motor skills. Babies explore their worlds through senses such as taste, smell, hearing, sight, and touch. Social referencing is when a child looks for emotional signals in circumstances, for instance, how far to wander off from the caregiver, or when the child scrapes their knee, they look to their mothers for a reaction before becoming upset. Another way for the brain to develop is when the brain is during early childhood that it becomes increasingly lacerated, where specific skills become localized either on the left or right cerebral hemisphere. So now let's talk about some of the cognitive development. Children also use play to master symbolic representation and increase their social knowledge, thereby reducing their self-centered orientation. So the more the child learns, the more their knowledge skills increase, which leads to understanding and social competencies. Children use play to learn about their surroundings. So according to Pickett, newborns interact with their environment through reflexive behaviors by following their instincts and involuntary reactions to get what they want, such as food, air, and attention. Infants develop object pre-maintenance, understanding that even though that they can't see the object or they know that the object is disappeared, they know that the object is still there. Infants explore physical objects, for example, sandstone, water, and learn the properties and physical laws about the objects. Social development. Social competence is the ability to innate and maintain satisfying reciprocal relationships with peers. Toddlers become more comfortable exploring on their own, although they still rely on the caregiver for emotional support. So by the age of 5 or 6 years old, social competence is established when children who are rejected in kindergarten are more likely to be rejected in middle school and have adjustment problems in adolescence and adulthood. While popular children are cooperative and display pro-social behaviors with their peers. Unpopular rejected children are more aggressive or withdrawn, and they're out of sync with their peers in the activities that they are interacting with each other. So now we're going to talk about infants and toddlers with special needs. Visual communication between a caregiver and child is a major key factor in establishing attachment. So an infant depends on visual signals from the caregiver to learn about the world. For an infant who is blind, it is essential for the parents and unseen child to establish a synchronized communication system that compensates the child. Healthy infants develop resources for acquiring knowledge through the visual perceptual system. Infants who have hearing impairment make up for it through developmental visual senses. So most parents don't discover that their child can't hear until the second year, so by then the child has missed a great deal of communication via language. Infants with severe disabilities such as cerebral palsy and severe mental retardation have a high risk of parental rejection, withdrawal, and depression. An infant with severe disabilities can strain family finances as well as can cause parents to make poor decisions regarding education and health care, which can lead to child neglect or abuse. So now let's talk about abuse and neglect. Childhood abuse refers to physical or psychological injuries that are intentionally inflicted by an adult. Child neglect, which is more often unintentional, involves the failure of a caregiver to respond to or care for a child. Abused or neglected babies are at risk of physical, cognitive, and emotional impairments. Neglect and abuse leads to failure to thrive syndrome, which is malnutrition or unresponsive caregiving in which the infant appears sick and cannot digest food properly. So here's one of the many ways to help abused or neglected infants or toddlers. You can remove the baby from the abused situation and assign grandparents or other relatives or adoptive parents to care for the child and provide the baby with a safe and secure environment while the adult seeks out help. So in conclusion, we talked about the factors that influence infants, such as culture, caregivers, and social relationships with parents or caregivers. We talked about the different types of attachment, such as insecure, resistant, avoidant, and disoriented, and secure attachments. We talked about separation from caregivers. Infants will experience separation anxiety. And we talked about brain development, such as genetics, caregivers, parents, and environment. We talked about the cognitive development, such as reflex skills, social skills, and exploration. We also talked about physical development, body growth, brain development, and senses, children with special needs, hearing, sight, and severe disabilities. We talked about the social development, such as social developments with peers and relationships with caregivers and parents. And lastly, we talked about abuse and neglect, such as broken bones, malnutrition, and emotional impairment or physical abuse. My works cited was by Craig G. J. and Don W. With the book of Understanding Human Development. And thank you for watching my infancy development project, and I hope you have a nice day.